This episode is sponsored by Bark Technologies. I am truly so grateful that these days we parents have a safer device option for our children. The Bark phone was built for families who are looking to ramp up their child's online safety. It has parental controls built in and allows us to manage their entire digital experience super easily and keep them safe from harm. Now on to the episode. So welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have a special guest, retired law enforcement officer and CEO and co-founder of Raven, a nonprofit lobbying firm focused on legislative and policy solutions to protect children online. I have John Pizzuro. Welcome, John.
Hey, thank you so much, Nikki.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. And as you may know, this podcast is for parents who are worried about social media. And today I'd like to focus on the role that social media plays in facilitating crimes against children. And this is a topic that parents don't necessarily want to hear about, I think, but they need to. Many parents think that online harms cannot reach their child, but unfortunately, that is not true. I've talked to too many families that thought that, and their children were, in fact, harmed. So to jump in the 25-ish years you spent in the New Jersey State Police leading investigations, what did you see the role of social media playing in crimes against kids?
Well, obviously it changed. It went from one computer per household in 2008. I think the last statistics is 21.1 internet capable devices now. And I don't know if people are counting their refrigerator or their Nest or what
Whoa.
have you.
Yeah.
But if you just think about that, so I think the difference is the scale, right? And
Yeah.
the challenge, we were talking about parents is we would give out, I think on my task force, my last year, just and that was pre-COVID, did probably about 400 presentations, but who shows up are the 4 or 5 parents, right? Because everyone else thinks this isn't going to happen to them. I think the biggest difference is the ecosystem of communication, because that's where, look, for lack of a better term, that's where children play, right? That's where our friendships are, our connections are. And I think that is the biggest thing that I've seen is that even if you look at like 10, 11, and I forget what the New York Times said, I think it was on Instagram, I think it was somewhere in upwards of 1 million children that are under the age of 13 that are on social media or that was on Instagram. But I think that's the thing is that you have the issue of children talking to their parents to lie about their age because that's where their friends are. And I think that is where the problem really starts.
And what is the problem with children under 13 getting on these platforms where they can
Well,
access anybody in the world?
you hit it right there. You can access anyone in the world. And we went from a small society to a global society. And I think that's where parents don't understand. I mean, look, we've arrested offenders from different countries, from California, all traveling, by the way, to find 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and 11-year-olds. So, and I think from a parent perspective, I think that's what really they don't understand. There's cases upon cases where you had someone who's just sitting and talking to someone online, but they will go meet them.
I might think my kid is too smart to be fooled by someone online, an adult that might want to take advantage of them. Tell me what you have experienced regarding children who are smart kids and been taught not to give personal information to strangers, but when it's online and adults can act as children or gain the trust of children, like what are those relationships looking like in your experience from what you've seen in your investigations?
So there's a couple things. I had a
Yeah.
12-year-old who had told me, and this is going back 5 years ago, that she didn't have enough likes, and that's why she interacted with someone because she thought she would have enough likes, right? And here is the big grooming thing, and this is what people don't talk about, and this is from an experience from what I see.
Yeah.
It's not just a gift, it's the matching of language. So what parents really need to understand when you see someone talking about, let's say, a concert or music or just different interests, right, that someone might have, what offenders do really well is they match language. So if I said that, for example, if you said like you like Taylor Swift, and I said, Taylor Swift? Ooh, I like Taylor Swift too. What's your favorite song? Oh, this is my favorite song. We tend to like when people talk about the things that we like, right? What do we like talking about most? Ourselves. So when people are able to replicate that in a 10, 11, and 12-year-old, it forms a connection. And I think that's where parents don't really understand. Like we always talk about, hey, if someone said something inappropriate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if someone gave you a gift. But what we don't see is the little bit about it. So there's communities on the dark net or Tor, right? One of those communities, they talk specifically on the best ways to converse with 9, 10, and 11 and 12-year-olds on apps.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to, like, as you're doing this educationally, right?
Yeah.
Offenders do the same thing
Yeah.
on the best techniques to get children.
Mm-hmm.
And no one really realizes this is going on because that's the dark aspect of things, right? We don't want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. But
Mm-hmm.
from a parent standpoint, we have fear, right? So here's what perfect analogy, right? You're in California, right, Nikki?
Yes. Yeah.
So, all right. So, earthquake, right? You
Yeah.
hit an earthquake, right? It's
Yesterday.
top of mind. Yeah,
Right. Right.
yesterday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're ready to jump, right? Because things are moving, and
Mm-hmm.
your fear center in your brain tends you to move that, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
tend to take action.
Yeah.
If you see something dangerous, your body is pre-wired, like your amygdala, your fear center, basically says, "Oh, let me get out of this." But
Mm-hmm.
in your home, you are online in a safe space.
Yes.
That's why you can't see it. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
parents really don't understand. Because if I could see my child who's
Mm-hmm.
sitting right here on a couch
Yeah.
or in a restaurant or in the bedroom, I could see them, they're safe. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where the parental aspect and that's where offenders rely upon, right? So
Yes.
I think
Right.
that's paramount right there.
Yeah. In my interview recently with Brian Montgomery, whose son passed from suicide after being sextorted, and Brian shared that, by giving him this phone in his bedroom with not unrestricted access, but access to just social media, we were opening a door to let a monster into the most dangerous people on the planet into our child's bedroom. And then I added, it doesn't even look scary. It looked like a teenage girl, like a nice teenage girl. And so your child doesn't have that fear response because they're being approached by someone that can look like anyone. And even on Snapchat specifically, they don't allow you to use your actual photo in the profile image. You have to use a Bitmoji, which is like a cartoon
Yeah.
character version. So you look at sometimes side by sides of like a booking photo of a predator and their Bitmoji, and it's insane to see the difference. I wanted to touch on the scripts and the training that these predators get on how to exploit children. And some of that is actually happening on open public Facebook groups. Paul Raphael, cyber analyst, just
Yeah.
identified thousands of groups, groups with thousands of members on Facebook that are being used. So these social media platforms are not doing a great job of removing the access between predators and our children and this type of content. Is there a specific platform or platforms that you've seen predators preferring to use to target children?
They've used everyone. I mean, there's not
Okay.
one that, and everything from your gaming systems to Snap to, they're going to go where your children are, right? To
Mm-hmm.
Minecraft. The more that someone or where a child is, the more people things change. So there's other small app companies that
Mm-hmm.
will change, like Discord's like a big communities where people will move to. Kick, when we were investigating,
Oh
it went
yeah.
from Kick, right?
Yeah.
So there is not one specific one. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the challenge becomes they're not really moderated, right? Before we
Mm-hmm.
were able to moderate and take a look at, now we
Mm-hmm.
realize we have to have, there's just too many users.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on something, and here's an interesting thing, Nikki, is
Mm-hmm.
that we might know an offender, right? For example, came up with, we might violate terms of service,
Mm-hmm.
and they might report one individual screen name, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
this person has another 15 screen names, all
Mm-hmm.
associated from the same IP address.
Yeah.
They only eliminate the one, they don't eliminate the other 15,
Right.
right? So that's where that proactive aspect comes in from. A parent can report it, but that individual already has another 15 accounts.
Yeah. Right. And the social media platform collects device ID. So they actually know that this device is related to so many different, they can pull that data on how many accounts are on one device. And I can assume they don't remove the device ID entirely because they're getting money and engagement from all the other accounts that the person has.
Yeah, 11 billion. That's what they made off of children 17 and under last year. 11 billion.
Yeah. Okay. So I wonder, parents still, my daughter's friend's mom just gave her 8-year-old a phone. And so she obviously must think that's not going to happen to my child. But when it comes to things like, and I'm familiar with the fentanyl access,
Hmm.
fake pills on, especially on Snapchat being sold to kids. And I know it's not a matter of if, but when your kid will see drug content or be contacted by a drug dealer or recommended to connect with a drug dealer by Snapchat. I can honestly say if your kid's on Snapchat, they're going to come across drug content. When it comes to predators, what are we looking at for odds? Like if I give my kid social media access, are they going to be contacted by a predator, or are they probably going to be okay? Like what are we looking at regarding odds here?
It's not if, it's just when.
Yeah.
Like if you're on social media, and again, I don't have a statistic necessarily
Yeah,
to
right.
back
I
this
know.
up, but
Yeah.
I'm going off experience.
Yeah.
But I would say if that you're on social media for 1 year and you have an account within 1 year, the odds of you actually getting approached by one individual within 1 year is
Mm-hmm.
probably 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're a child, especially because adults are looking to target children. And a lot of adults will say, my feed doesn't have that kind of thing. I'm not getting contacted by predators, but they're not contacting adults because most adults know, not all adults actually. Some elderly people are getting targeted. Have you seen any of that with sextortion schemes?
Yeah, you're going to have the same thing. So in the
Yeah.
in the elder aspect, now
Yeah.
you're going to have people that look like your grandchild
Yeah.
or stuff trying to access that. Now, I'm going to give you something a little bit even more scarier.
Yeah.
AI, which we're
Yeah.
not even prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Nikki, I could create an image. Forget the Bitmoji. Now I
Mm-hmm.
can create another image of someone to look a certain way, and it doesn't matter. I
Mm-hmm.
can actually chat GPT stop this, but they were about to roll out like new voices.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can just replicate someone's voice.
Mm-hmm.
So the scale and grooming, and this is what's going to happen, and this is where we're going within
Mm-hmm.
in the next year, and this is my biggest worry, is right now offenders, they have to go and actually search for children, and they have to start really identifying victims and spending time doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with I can machine learn, meaning is that I can just set up a program within this is what's going to happen, where
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do it myself. I can have the program find children and
Yeah.
then interact with children and then spit that out to me, right? So
Yeah.
now
Ooh.
instead of grooming one child a day, I
Oh,
can groom
yeah.
1,000 children, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's getting scarier and scarier to let our kids access social
Yeah,
media.
as you can see, I'm a really hit at parties, from
Yeah, no, me too.
from
People
depressing.
don't. The other day, I was at a birthday party the other day, and the mom was like about to say she gave her child a watch, and she's like was scared to say it in front of me. I was like, it's okay, I'm not judging you. So and with AI, I reported on a case. I think it was in the UK last week. A man was offering a service where other pedophiles could submit a child's photo, an actual child, to him. He would use AI to make a sexualized video of that child. So doing something sexual just from a picture
Yep.
and then selling it back to the original pedophile. And so for me, I haven't shared my children online in 4+ years, and I don't allow my school to put them in online. And how do you feel about when it comes to parents? Like, is it safe to share our children's photos online anymore?
The short answer, no, if you really want to be safe. But how do you not share it when your child is at a school dance or they're at, a sporting event? And I think
Yeah.
now schools, again, this is something mindful for schools, right? You take the
Mm-hmm.
pictures, you put them online of your children doing actual things,
Mm-hmm.
because they have that license of it. And now I could take that image off their website.
Yeah.
So even from a parent standpoint, you can lock your social media down, but your child could be involved in sports or other
Mm-hmm.
extracurricular activities that the school
Yeah.
uses as part of their own
Mm-hmm.
marketing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, because it's public, I can go in and get those images as well.
Yeah. So I signed the form saying that they cannot
Yeah.
use my children's image on the website. Obviously, they're in a yearbook, and that probably is digital. There's no
Yeah.
100% not allowing your child to have a digital identity. But as far as putting them out on like a public social media site, I think we need to get away from doing that. Really scrubbing your followers list, because a lot of times, and you tell me, predators, are they strangers usually, or are they someone that already knows the child?
Well, they're both. I mean,
Right.
you're talking about like even from hands-on offenders. There are a lot of people that I mean, look, I can't tell you the amount of police officers, attorneys, Boy Scout leaders, teachers. I mean,
Hmm.
and generally speaking, they're people that know each other. But as much as there's that segment, there also is the segment of people that we don't know, and then that's where the
Yeah.
online world is. And I like, for example, Instagram, right? If
Hmm.
you go on and you just tend to look at, like, let's say TikTok dance videos, right, of
Hmm.
12-year-olds,
Hmm.
I'm going to be fed that content. Like, the interesting thing, if you want to find anything about anyone, just take a look on their reels.
Hmm.
Maybe you get the guy who's trying to land the airplane, or you get Soprano videos, because I clicked on a couple and
Yeah.
that's what I get, right?
Yeah.
So I understand it from a social media and a business standpoint. You want
Hmm.
to push advertising and content to what people are interested in, right?
Sure. Sure.
But the problem is it doesn't differentiate when it's trying to protect children. So
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
I consume that content,
Hmm.
I'm more likely to have that content, and I'm more
Hmm.
likely to have friends recommended to me from that
Yeah.
content.
Right. So if not you, let's say a man is a
Yeah.
predator and he's liking or engaging with photos of, girls in dance outfits or doing dances, the algorithm is going to serve him more content, but the algorithm knows he's an adult man, whether he give his right age or not. They re-age people. They know how old people are, and they shouldn't be allowed to keep prioritizing more children into his feed.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Here's the funny part: is your device knows how
Hmm.
old you are, right?
Yeah.
So we could talk about legislation a little bit, but like
Hmm.
there's some legislation that I want to work on from a Raven standpoint, specifically next year,
Hmm.
especially to protect children, right? Like
Hmm.
device-based age identification, which
Yeah. Yeah.
is really important.
Yes.
And we're actually working on that. And I've had conversations with numerous senators and congressmen
Yeah.
specifically just about that.
Okay.
Um,
Because that would provide so that if you say no social media in your state until 14 or 16 years old, you don't have to like prove your age to the social media company. It's just based on your device.
Correct.
That's
So, and
great.
this is the best way to do it, and this is why, right? Your device knows how old you are, right?
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of state laws that are trying to do that, but honestly, to enforce it, it has to be federally, and it has to be consistent among the U.S.
Right.
So, if I'm 11 and I download Snapchat
Hmm.
and I go to get on it, I can't get on it. All
Hmm.
right, because there's the app will talk to the device and it
Hmm.
won't let me join. Think about this way, right? I go into a bar and I show my ID,
Yeah.
right? I don't take my ID, right? They don't take it from me. They just look at it and say,
Yes.
you're of age or not of age. You can come in or not in.
Yes.
And conversely,
Hmm.
if I am 40 and I want to get on a young app, I can't
Hmm.
pretend to be 12 either, right?
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah. Hmm.
so it goes both ways. And also
Wow.
the other thing we have to worry about is encryption. Privacy groups, right? And I understand the need for privacy. I understand the need for adults, but we have this, how do you put it, polarization of where we
Hmm.
have two complete opposites and there's no balance coming into the middle, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So if we could make sure that children, so I asked this from a senator, and I asked
Hmm.
him, he said, well, I believe in privacy. And I asked him, he had, I think, a 9-year-old and 11-year-old. I
Hmm.
said,
Good.
do you go in your children's bedroom? Of course I do. I
Hmm.
said, do you look at their devices? Of course I do. But I said, you just told me that you
Hmm.
believe in privacy. Well, the technology doesn't exist. Well, the technology does exist, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So my thing is that if you want to encrypt 17, 18, pick your age in those
Hmm.
conversations and keep it private, great. But should a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old have their conversations encrypted and private?
Hell no.
right?
And
To me, it's just common sense, right? It just,
And John, the tech companies are using end-to-end encryption purposefully to not be held liable for what's happening in
yes.
those conversations. So, are you familiar with David Erb? He's a Facebook whistleblower.
I think I might have heard the name. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
interviewing him soon, and he presented at, I went to a KOSA event last week in
Mm.
DC. His story is that he worked for Facebook. He was on the security team, and he realized that a lot of predation was happening through the people you may know feature. So Facebook was
Yep.
recommending adults to children in their local area, even. And that was where starting a lot of inappropriate predatory conversations in Facebook Messenger. He presented this to the executives, and the executives not only did nothing to stop this from happening, they actually added 2 weeks after that, added end-to-end encryption within Messenger so that the safety team can't even see what's happening no longer in these conversations, and they're not liable because they don't know what's happening in these conversations. That was infuriating to me.
Yeah, and that's by design, right? So if
Yeah.
I and here's the thing is that if I'm 10 or 11 and I don't have encryption and I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to a 50-year-old, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have encryption, right?
Mm-hmm.
Encryption only works if both ends are fully encrypted. So if you
Yeah. Right.
unencrypt the child conversation and
Yeah.
you encrypt the adult, you still have access to see what's happening to the child, right? So,
Okay.
and I
Right.
think that's where we have to get to. And look, it comes down to this. I testified in the Senate. I testified
Mm-hmm.
in the House, right? And then I was part of the tech hearing that the big five were
Yeah.
at
Good. Yeah.
come in January, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I'm sitting there in the audience, but it comes down to money, Nikki. The
Yeah.
bottom line is that it's profit.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to kick the can down the road as long as they can. Now, the funny part is that some of the people that work for the actual companies,
Mm-hmm.
like the trust and safety teams,
Yeah.
100% they're trying to do whatever they can. It's the corporate structure. And I can tell you this for a
Mm-hmm.
fact. I
Mm-hmm.
am in one room talking to one senator. In the next room, the tech lobby is
Mm-hmm.
in. So you got John Pizzuro, William Patterson University, and then you got like Brown, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and like,
I know. I
fighting in
know.
the other room.
Yes. And often those big tech lobbyists, from what I've heard and seen, that work for the big tech companies, but they were prior governmental employees. They're actually hiring from within the government who has relationships there and influence. And then they pass back and forth.
Yeah. So most lobbying firms, right, and this is what makes Raven a lot different,
Mm-hmm.
is that we actually worked in the field. So
Mm-hmm.
most lobbying firms, they were former staffers. They
Yeah.
have those
Right.
relationships with staffers, and that's what they
Yes.
facilitated. The difference
Mm-hmm.
between us is that we don't benefit in any way from this. When we go out on the
Mm-hmm.
Hill, like
Yeah.
Raven doesn't benefit, right? We're
Right.
just
Right.
going there just trying to protect not only kids, but make sure that we give the resources to the individuals out there protecting children, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
we don't have
Skin in the game, or, well, I
skin in the
guess.
game for that.
Yeah, sure. Pausing here to take a beat. These topics can be difficult and scary, but thankfully we have solutions to help protect our children online. I believe that the safest device option for your child is the Bark phone. You don't need to rush this decision, but when it is time, choose a phone that was created with kids' safety in mind, not the iPhone, which was created for adults. Bark is built to be safe from the ground up and uses advanced AI to scan text messages, social media, images, videos, and audio for threats like drug content, cyberbullying, predators, child sexual abuse material. The Bark phone actually doesn't even allow your child to take a nude image and save it to their phone, let alone send it to somebody. The effects of your children's tech use can be worrisome, but tools like Bark can give you peace of mind. If you are going to go with an Android or an iPhone, please consider layering on the Bark app, which is high-tech parental monitoring. It scans their activities for harmful content and sends you alerts. You can create screen time schedules, block certain websites and apps, and a lot more. Back to my conversation with John Pizzuro. And I wanted to ask you, and I hear this a lot, that encryption becomes a big problem in investigations for when you were working in law enforcement, right? And you needed access, you couldn't get access to conversations that would help incriminate a predator. But even on social media sites where maybe Snapchat, where the content disappears, were the social media companies helpful to you in investigations in providing the data you needed?
For the most part, no. I
Yeah.
mean, we only get is what we ask for. So here's a perfect example. If we did a
Mm.
subpoena
Yeah.
and we didn't word everything the right way, they're not going to voluntarily give us anything. So we
Mm-hmm.
have to go back. Now, you're talking sometimes it takes a long time. So think about this from a worldwide standpoint. So last
Mm-hmm.
year, there was 36 million cyber tips,
Mm-hmm.
just from a
Yeah.
tip perspective, right?
Yeah. Right.
So now law enforcement, for example, New Jersey last year had 25,000 cyber tips. When I left in 2021, when I retired, we had
Mm-hmm.
5,000. So that's
Oh, wow.
5 times the amount.
Yeah.
Now, how do you sort through all them? Each one that we look through and it actually has a viable lead, we have to send legal process to the tech company, to whatever, whether it be Meta, whether it be Snap, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be, Google or Discord. And each one has a different challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the bills that was out there was the Stop CSAM Act, which would
Mm-hmm.
create tech companies to have data uniformity. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the biggest things, is that for us investigating it, each company does something a little differently and gives us only little pieces of data. It makes it almost impossible for us to do our job. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone thinks that we have all the information. We just might get a screen name or an IP address or
Mm-hmm.
maybe just a meme.
Right.
And without better information, we
Mm-hmm.
can't protect children better, right? But
Yeah.
that would create the tech companies to actually have the infrastructure in
Yeah.
order to give us better data.
Yeah, good. And one thing I hear from a lot of parents, and there's parents who lost children 2 years ago, and they still cannot get into their kids' Apple devices because they don't have the password. Is that something that you ran into?
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully, what we were able to do for the most part is
Mm-hmm.
that forensically we can get into the actual device.
Okay.
So I think, like, for example, from an iPhone, we were able to get into the device. We
Mm-hmm.
can't get into the actual conversations if things were deleted, if it was off the server, but we
Okay.
could get into the device a lot of times and reconstruct and get a lot of information, including
Okay.
deleted information. But that's on the forensic aspect, and that's only
Mm-hmm.
if we have the device. If
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the device, it makes it almost impossible.
And there's a timing factor here. A parent, Sam Chapman, who lost his son, they were able to get into the device the same day and find out who the drug dealer was and track them down. And so, because that drug dealer didn't have time to like make a new profile and hide himself. So, just important for parents to always know their child's password,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, their own password and expediency. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people tell me, like, well, what should I tell parents? Everyone wants put on a fail-safe, an
Mm-hmm.
app that basically will let them know everything. Communication is the biggest really key to anything, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and especially in instantaneously, like there are times where a parent found out that their child was on a gaming system being approached by an offender,
Mm-hmm.
where we were able to act right then and there and
Mm-hmm.
not only protect the child but protect that or arrest that offender.
Yeah.
A lot of people say this, and again, I know I throw a lot of information at you here, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not just one victim. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what parents have to realize, that it's not, you are not alone. All right. These offenders have multiple victims.
Yeah.
And I think that, we don't understand that. Like, there's this study called the Butner study that done by Dr. Michael Burke, one of our board members in
Mm-hmm.
Raven. And this is for the sharing of child sexual abuse material, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's these IP addresses in the U.S. Right now. There's 100,000 IP addresses in the U.S. that are trading known images of and videos of children being tortured, sexually. Right.
Yeah.
Out of that 100,000, 50 to 85% of those individuals are hands-on offenders with 8 to 13 victims each. So right now, law enforcement's only investigating about 600 of them because of the scale, and there's not enough resources.
Wow. Wow.
So just to put this in context, there's about 500,000 victims that are being sexually abused hands-on right now that we're not even getting to in the U.S.
How do we fix that? We need more people
We need more
to help.
people. We need
Yeah.
we need a couple things. It's not just one simple one. Here's a funding example. So
Mm-hmm.
the ICAC task force that's predominantly investigating most of that,
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
2008 they were authorized at 60 million with the one computer per household. The authorization is still at 60 million. They've never been appropriated more than 32.1 million. So 61 task forces
Mm-hmm.
have to actually divide up. So it's $500,000 per task force. And
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
like to break into this iPhone,
Yeah.
I need something that costs $100,000. To break into my Android, $100,000. The forensic software to do it, 100 grand. I now
Whoa.
have no more money to do anything, right?
Wow.
So,
Yep.
or even hire people. And I think that is the biggest thing that we try to do from an educational standpoint. So
Mm-hmm.
you go from the law enforcement perspective, there's a
Mm-hmm.
prosecution component. What about victim services? What about child advocacy centers, right?
Mm-hmm.
For
Yep.
example, VOCA, which is, a funding mechanism for them, they don't get enough money.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem has become is that this really is the biggest epidemic, and people can talk about it all you want, but
Mm-hmm.
the victimization that goes online and the support for it, that you can't even, it's not even commensurate.
Okay. And one angle is to force social media companies to have a duty of care or be safer for our children. And that requires federal legislation. And so, what are you guys focusing on supporting at Raven regarding getting kids more safe or safer on social media?
So we support the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We support any mechanisms that's going to hold tech more accountable. And this
Mm-hmm.
includes the duty for care, actually noticing things that are online, more
Yeah.
moderation.
Yep.
What we also need is, so Stop CSAM, for example, was one bill that Raven had supported. There's the Protect Our Children Reauthorization Act, which
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
actually will help the ICAC task force. Which really is the funding component for that.
Okay.
We had the Report Act, which we supported and helped with,
Mm-hmm.
which would actually require, the electronic submission for CVIP, which is the victim
Mm-hmm.
identification piece, because
Mm-hmm.
Nikki, there's so many victims that we don't even know who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't get those individuals help. So if you've been victimized, for the parents out there, you know
Mm-hmm.
what, your child might have been victimized and they haven't told you, right?
Yeah.
And they're suffering in silence. And
Mm-hmm.
how do we get them the support that they need?
Mm-hmm.
And all this is part of the ecosystem because it's part of our online world. And I think that's where Raven is really kind of trying to push that envelope and force that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other bills that are coming up, like Shield, which
Mm-hmm.
is like, for example, the revenge porn, so to speak,
Yeah.
images, which
Yeah.
has the adult and children. The Defiance Act, which is a
Mm-hmm.
Graham and Durbin bill, which will actually help give civil remedies. For example, if
Mm-hmm.
someone taking someone's likeness, now I can pretend to be
Mm-hmm.
a 12-year-old and steal their likeness, but there was
Mm-hmm.
no civil recourse for that. So
Okay.
basically, there's not one thing that's going to make it everything better.
Yeah.
It's an ecosystem approach, right? You
Yes.
need to push it a little bit in all directions.
Agree. Yeah. One thing I like about KOSA too is because, not every child is going to be exploited or harmed in this way, but every child is going to probably become addicted to social media or, have their time taken away from healthier activities. And with KOSA, you can turn off the algorithm, which is huge for me because I think no kids need an addictive algorithm keeping their eyes on a screen all day long as the platform can hold them there. This is all going to take time. And I think societally, I hope that parents are just getting smarter about this and not giving their kids phones in the kids' bedrooms and delaying use and adding some monitoring. And what you said is most importantly, I think, having open conversations because kids don't come to their parents about a lot of this because they don't want you to take their phone away and they are addicted to that phone. What else do you want to touch on regarding what parents can do right now? Because I know all this legislation is going to take time.
Yeah, the legislation is going to take a while.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are dealing with politics. Like, even though the Senate overwhelmingly supported KOSA, it
Yep.
still has to go through the House. I think what parents really need to do is they have to understand that this is a danger. I mean, we give training to every other aspect, and I know some schools now do it, but
Mm-hmm.
why isn't this part of the curriculum? Why isn't social interaction? Why isn't this, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't start at 13 or 14. It's already too late. It has to start at a young level, right?
Mm-hmm.
The screen time, I think, is important too. If
Mm-hmm.
you can do anything, limit your children's screen time. Go outside, go for a walk. I mean, honestly, oxygen really does help. Fresh air
Mm-hmm.
really does help. And,
Mm-hmm.
we take that for granted because that's all I had as a child.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things that we have. And then look at your children's friends list. I mean, really, any social
Mm-hmm.
media account that your child has, who is on their list. They shouldn't be able to add anyone unless they approve of that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that starts the conversation. So maybe you could start a conversation with your son or daughter and say, hey, this person wants to add me as a friend, and ask them, who is this person? Because
Mm-hmm.
at least that gets them into the mindset of actually thinking about it. And you
Mm-hmm.
also are able to talk to them. Oh, what's that person post online, right?
Yeah, and regular conversations, and they don't have to be so serious. Just while you're
No.
driving along, while you're current. What does Chris McKenna at Protect Young Eyes say? While you're stirring soup, just bring it up and don't look at them, don't make eye contact, but just let them know you're there and you would like to know it when they're ready to tell you. And I love that you mentioned starting when they're young, because and starting making those safer decisions when they're young regarding what you give them. Do they need an iPad at 2, 3 years old so that you can get dinner done? No, they don't.
No.
And kids that are given devices more when they're young do tend to have addictive behaviors and tendencies when they're teenagers and adults. And we know that now.
Yeah. I'm sitting down at a restaurant. This is in Kentucky, and this is about pre-COVID, right? But,
Yeah.
I'm sitting down,
Yeah.
and a waitress came by, and, it was me and the Kentucky ICAC commander at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, yeah, I just got back to work. I got a 2-year-old and 4-year-old. You know what? I just gave them my iPhone. Best babysitting device ever. And as she walked
Oh,
away, I look at Jeremy Merle, who was the Kentucky ICAC commander, and I'm like,
yeah.
and like you they're doomed
Yeah.
in
I
that
know.
respect of what we see, right?
Yeah, John, it's so sad. I have this dream of like this fantasy of being in a restaurant and seeing a family that has little kids and them not giving their kid a device. And then I'm going to go over there and be like, I think it's so cool that you guys sat here and I know they were acting up, but you didn't give them a
Yeah.
device. And I go to restaurants often and I've never seen it. I've never gotten a chance to do that. And I think that needs to become normalized, because I mean, if we listen to any of the interviews I have with researchers and pediatricians, and there's long-term effects, let alone the predators that they will get access to or get access to them. Just the effects of screen time are really bad. And we won't even get into how much screen time they're getting at school in this conversation. Um, anyway, I really appreciate all your perspective and your work at Raven. Can you tell listeners where they can learn more about your work and connect with you?
Yep, sure. Raven, www.raven.us, really
Mhm.
simple. Whoever's listening, from a donation, we're a nonprofit,
Mm,
501c4. Their tax donations aren't tax deductible because we do political stuff, and that's
mhm.
the reason for that.
Yeah.
My email, jp@raven.us. And more importantly, I think if you're a parent, you have an open door to whatever your elected official is.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter if it's a congressperson or a senate. I think it's important for you to voice those concerns
Mhm.
to protect your kids. It's up to everyone's part, and I think the parents here, and really are the driving force, because we're here trying to protect as many kids as we can.
Yeah, John, thank you so much. And I think a year ago, I never would have thought to reach out to my representative, to be honest with you. And now I've realized how important that is and how easy it is. You can just go to
Yeah.
house.gov or senate.gov. Right now, we need parents to go to house.gov and contact the representative about KOSA because we're on a timeline. But it's so easy. And I even I called to make an appointment at my local representative's office that's local to me. I haven't gotten a call back yet, but I'm hoping to go in person. I think that can be really effective. So, and then I would love to have follow on conversations with you about these other bills that I'm not as familiar with as they kind of move forward.
Yeah, definitely do that. And then look, we have only a couple months left. We have the
Mhm.
presidential election.
Yeah.
So KOSA is really important because it's
Yeah.
close to passing, like SHIELD is close to passing. And
Okay.
then come January, it's a whole new Congress, and we're going to have to do this all over again.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, John, thank you so much. These topics can be heavy, but I just believe it's so important for parents to reflect on these issues and do our best to keep our kids safe. And that requires reaching out to our representatives and having an influence on legislation. And I really appreciate what you do to further these topics in the eyes of our representatives and getting these things in front of them and getting them to vote in favor of our kids and not these tech companies. So,
Yeah.
thank you,
And
John.
I appreciate it, Nikki, and great job
Yeah.
on your podcast too, as well. I think it's important, the more people and the more we can discuss this and the more it's
Hmm.
out there, the
Hmm.
more likely we are to have a solution for it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.